everybody, this is Diana from So Very Crafty, and today we are here to make this fantastic reversible bucket hat. How terrific is this? This is a fun and functional bucket hat that anyone can make using basic sewing skills. It requires just a little bit of curved sewing and some straight stitch, and you can make this fantastic little bucket hat that you can wear to ward off the sun, ward off the rain, whatever it is you want to ward off from your head. So how do we make this project? Super simple. I have the pattern. I'm going to put it in the comments section, and you can download it and have all the pieces that you need for this project. And there are really only 3 pattern pieces that you'll need for this project to get going. It is that simple. So, how do we get going on this? Well, let's get started. But before we do, give me a thumbs up on this video if you like it, and subscribe to my channel. So the first thing that we are going to do is download the pattern. We have a crown piece, a brim piece, and what I call the top band piece. And those are our 3 pieces that we need for this project. You're going to cut 2 of the top band pieces, 2 of the brim pieces, and 1 of the outer pieces of your main fabric, your lining fabric, and some Pellon 808 interfacing. I like to interface these hats because it gives them a little bit more structure. If you want just a floppy hat, you don't necessarily need the Pellon 808 interfacing. It's completely up to you, but I like a little bit of structure to mine, so I use the Pellon 808. So what you're going to do is you are going to cut out your interfacing first. And I have done that here. I have cut out all of my pieces, and you will notice on the top band and on the exterior brim piece, or on all the brim pieces, that they are cut on the fold. So you want to make sure that when you cut these, they are cut on the fold. So I've done that, and I have cut these on the fold so that we can unfold them, and you're going to get like a half circle. You will have 2 half circles of the brim, as you can see here, and 2 half circles of the band, and you're going to have 1 crown. Now what I like to do so that all of my pieces are even is I'm going to take my outer fabric, which I have here, open it up, and I'm going to fuse this interfacing onto my outer fabric. I'm going to fuse all of my interfacing pieces onto the outer fabric using a hot iron. Once I have fused these using the interfacing, I am then going to double up the lining fabric with the outer fabric, and I'm going to cut out the pieces together so that they match perfectly. So I'm going to head over to my iron and do that so we don't waste a lot of time here, and cut out all of these pieces. So let's hold on and we'll get back to it. Okay, we are back and we have our pieces all cut out just the way we want them. So the first thing we are going to do is we are going to construct the brim, and that's these large circles. So the first thing we are going to do is separate out our lining pieces from our outer pieces. So we are going to take these large half circles, we're going to place them right sides together, and we are going to stitch them just on the short ends using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. We're going to do that for the lining pieces and for the outer pieces. And once we've done that, we are going to continue to construct the brim. So I'm going to head over to the sewing machine and show you how that's done. We'll be right back. So here we are at the sewing machine, and we are just going to stitch these short ends together using our 1/4 inch seam allowance. And we'll stitch the other side. And we will open up our seam, as we can see here, and we can finger press the seam open. The next thing we're going to do is we are going to top stitch these seams open just along the edge here. And we are going to repeat this for both of the seams on the outer brim, and we are going to do that on the lining brim as well. So I'm going to do that. I'm not going to show it on camera because you've seen the technique, and we'll go on to the next step. Okay, we have now completed our 2 brim pieces, and now we are just going to put them together. So we are going to place these brim pieces right sides together, matching these seams, matching the seams on both sides. And we are going to stitch using our 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way around the outside of the brim. So I'm going to head over to the sewing machine. I'm going to show you how we are going to stitch this curve very simply and very easily around the brim so that we have a nice crisp brim. Okay, we are back at the sewing machine, and we are going to sew the outside of this brim. Now it's up to you whether you want to pin this or not. I don't think that you really need to pin this, but if you're more of a beginner sewist, I would recommend that you do pin it. I'm not going to pin it here. I don't see any reason to at this point. The fabric is relatively stiff and it's not going to move around on me too much. So I'm just going to go ahead and stitch it for you using our 1/4 inch seam allowance. And I'm going to start right here at the seam. So I've made sure that my seams align. I've got my presser foot there, and we are just going to take our time and we are going to stitch all the way around this brim. And as you can see, we're pulling, making sure that our two pieces are continuing to be right sides together with the raw edges together all along the way. This is a very gentle curve, so if you've never sewn a curve, this is a good way to start. Stop if you need to. I'm just going to finish sewing this brim all the way around and we will move on to our next step. Okay, so we have finished sewing our brim, and as you can see, we have turned it right sides out and we have top stitched all along the edge of the brim. So once we have finished sewing the brim, we simply turned it right sides out so that the lining is on one side and the outer fabric is on the other side, and we have top stitched it all the way around. That's it, and now we're going to move on to our next step. Okay, we have finished our brim. Now we are going to make the crown. And the way we do that is we have to start first with the band. And we are going to make the band exactly the same way that we made the brim. We are going to place these band pieces right sides together and stitch them on the sides, the short sides, just as we did on the brim piece. We're going to do that for the lining as well. Then we are going to top stitch our seam in the same way that we did on the brim. I'm not going to show you that on camera. There's no need because we went through the whole process when we created the brim. So I'm going to head over to the sewing machine and I'm just going to stitch these up real quick and I'll be right back. Okay, so now we have the two band pieces, as you can see, and they are sewn exactly the same way as the brim, with the seams top stitched the way they should be. And now we have to add the crown, and the crown is this circle piece, and we are going to add that to the narrow part of this. As you can see, there's a wide part, which is the bottom, and the narrow part, and we are going to add these so they are right sides together. And the best way to do that is to fold this in quadrants. So you have your seams on one side, and then make sure your seams are in the middle. just sort of finger press the sides, because with this interfacing, that mark is going to stay. Do the same thing with your crown piece. Finger press it. Finger press it again, and you can see these little quadrant pieces. You are going to then line those up with your markings on your band piece and pin them. And the best thing to do is just to pin where your markings are. And then pin the rest from there. And as you can see, this crown fits right there, right exactly where it needs to be. Between those markings. And you will definitely need to pin this before you stitch. Now you're going to repeat this process, and that's your crown. You're going to repeat this process for the lining as well. So I'm going to pin this lining, and then we're going to head over to the sewing machine, and we are going to stitch this lining, this crown to our band piece and our lining to our band piece, and then we'll move on to our next step. Okay, we have our 2 crown pieces finished, and now we need to move on to our next step, and that is to add our brim to our crown piece. Okay, so we are going to do this by putting this crown upside down and our lining right sides up on the brim. We are going to match our seams, and we are going to place these right sides together and pin. This is definitely some place where we're going to want to pin. Even if you're an experienced sewist, you're going to want to pin this. Pin on both sides of the brim and the crown. Pin all the way around. I'm not going to do that on camera because it takes some time. And then we're going to head over to the sewing machine and we're going to sew all the way around this. Okay, now we have what looks like a hat, but we're not finished because we have all these raw edges, and we want to cover those up. So we are going to place our hat, brim and all, inside of our lining crown, right sides together. We're going to match up our seams as we have done previously. And we're going to pin. Make sure that our brim is all the way inside because we don't want to catch that as we're sewing. Match up the other seam. Add a few pins to our crown. And we are going to head over to the sewing machine, and once again with our 1/4 inch seam allowance, we are just going to stitch all the way around, except we are going to leave a fairly large opening in our lining here for turning our hat right sides out. So let's head over to the sewing machine and do that. Okay, so I have turned my hat right sides out through the opening in the lining. I have then stitched this opening closed using ladder stitch so that you can't see it, and it looks nice and clean and neat. And we have now finished our bucket hat. We have top stitched along the crown seam, top stitched along the band seam, top stitched along the brim for a more professional and finished look. We have a nice finished lining, everything nice and neat, just the way we want it. One for me, one for my husband. Super simple, takes a little bit of time, but otherwise the sewing is very easy to do. So I hope you enjoyed this video on how to make a simple bucket hat with a little bit of sewing and a little bit of fabric. You too can have a bucket hat that's perfect for you. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give me a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and look at some of my other videos on how to make simple sewing projects, and head over to sewverycrafty.com for many, many more sewing tutorials. Thanks again, and subscribe to my channel. Bye.